Evaluation question 1. In what ways does your media product use, develop or challenge forms or conventions of real media products?
Narrative. Our video carries many codes and conventions related to the horror genre. We added this dark brownish effect onto our clips that are in the past, so that it was clear for the audience to see that we were jumping between different eras and ages, however using the same character. We also sped up all of our clips so that it gave this sharp and quite twitchy effect. This would put the audience on edge, and it would also relate back to the other texts that we've been using, such as Twilight and True Blood. In Twilight, they mainly film in places such as woods and fields, and when they do so, they use these dark filters that create blues and purples and blacks. We also did this for the modern images in our clip, such as when she's digging into the floor or walking through the woods.
Here the character is represented mostly by her innocence. Like, you can see that she's wearing a white dress, which obviously white is the colour of innocence. I mean, she's stereotypically mysteriously walking through the woods, which is, you could link back to, I suppose, Vampire Diaries, where they start off in the woods, but it's not as innocent, so there's juxtaposition. But in the Vampire Diaries, for example, Elena, you can see the major change from where she's not a vampire to a vampire. Like, her clothing style changes. It's a lot more dramatic when she turns a vampire. So we want to emphasise this too. So as you can see, her wearing a white dress, then later wearing like a short, more revealing black dress, shows her dramatic change in her attitude. So here she has no care in the world, like walking through the woods, just slowly touching the trees, at one with nature. Yet later, she drags her hands down the trees as if you can see the anger represented through her emotion and through her hands.
Throughout our piece, we used two types of text. First, when we were referring to the creative cast, and secondly, when we were referring to the title at the very end. When referring to the creative cast, we wanted to use a text that was sharp and quite gothic at the same time, and almost had that church feel to it. We wanted to be cold and to link in with the horror aspect. So first of all, we had directed by and costume and who's starring and things like that. And this is when we used this text that was quite gothic and old. Later on, obviously, Lovebite comes in, and that's more modern, that's more sharp, that's more in your face. Because at that point in time, we get that contrast between the old text and the new text, like we get the contrast between the old clips and the new clips. In the text, when we're referring to the creative cast, we just have a black background. We want it to be quite simple, and we want the people to be able to see the text quite clearly. However, when we're talking about Lovebite at the very end of the title revealed, we've used splashes of blood to emphasise the genre, and we've also gone for quite a dark red background, obviously connotations of horror and blood and things like that. We chose the location of the woods because it linked in with other texts we've seen, such as Twilight and the Vampire Diaries, where most of the time is spent in an area that's quite rural as such. We represented it in quite a dark way, although it is in the past, and we've added quite a brown tint to it, and not a dark one like you see later on in the clip. We still wanted it to be quite eerie, and we wanted it to show straight away as the viewers watching it, that we wanted them to know what the clip's about. Another key aspect of our text was we wanted to relate it to the theme of being lonely and to have no one around you, and we thought the woods would be perfect for it because, well, it is really rural, and the fact that we only used 2 cast members reinforces the idea of being alone. For the opening shot, when it's just a clip of the woods and she's behind a tree, it was really important for the viewers to know that she is on her own and she's in a place where there isn't anyone else and she's unable to relate to anyone else.
Here's an example of our subgenre. So obviously our main genre was horror, but as you can see here, here's where the romance side of things comes in. The main connotation for the horror was obviously the blood and the gore, but here for the romance you can see the love that's represented by their closeness and especially their clothes. So for example, her dress is white, which represents her innocence, and then her being barefoot represents that she doesn't really mind about the innocent things in life. She wore a pearl headband, which, you know, again, pearls represents, it highlights the white and the innocence, and but the main difference was the filters. The old one is more yellow and eerie, whereas the new one was a lot more dark and mysterious. It brought out the colours of her nails and her hair and her skin especially, which we used extra sort of makeup to make sure she came across as a lot more pale to juxtapose the difference between her skin and her dress. So it was interesting to have two genres, just so it wasn't your stereotypical horror or your stereotypical romance. And I think we learnt from our audience research that this was a really popular genre, combining the two, as you appealed to obviously not only girls, but the horror side, maybe the boys too.
When editing our piece, we use many different techniques, sound being one of them. When searching for music to put over the whole text, we wanted to find something that was eerie, but at the same time quite emotional. And we also wanted to incorporate the aspect of being lonely and being cold, such as she is. Each clip, we actually decided not to have any sound or any dialogue because we thought this would interfere with what the audience and the viewers were feeling and how they would be able to relate with the characters. So we thought if it was silent, it would leave the viewer to their own interpretation of what's happening. So yeah, go back to the music. We timed it perfectly so that clips such as her eyes opening revealed so much about the character, and especially the dark colour of her eyes. We compared this to a main film, Twilight, because later on in other types of films, such as New Moon and Breaking Dawn, they have flashes back to the past, because obviously these vampires live forever. And we could easily tell that these were flashes back due to the filters used and how it was much darker and more sinister, and obviously mise-en-scene and the clothes they were wearing.
So in our last shot of the character, we thought we didn't want to reveal too much of her. This is one of the main reasons we didn't show her teeth, but we wanted to reveal a side of her that maybe you haven't seen yet. So she looks quite slightly smug here, but not too smug. It was perfectly timed the way we got her to sort of look over in the distance. I mean, here we time, as we said, we time the music specifically to match the notes within, and Vampire Diaries also uses the effect, highlighting their supernatural qualities through their pupils. This also links back to the mise-en-scène. Here you can tell she's a vampire because she's still very pale and the atmosphere is still very dark.
Thank you, that is Evaluation 1 complete.